Nobody noticed when you started pulling back. But everybody felt it when you were gone. That's not coincidence. That's not luck. That's the quiet, devastating power of someone who finally understood their own worth. And stopped explaining it. There is a kind of walking away that the world never talks about. Not the dramatic kind. Not the door-slamming, voice-raising, speech-giving kind that movies have taught us to associate with strength and self-respect. Not the kind where you list every wrong that was done to you and demand acknowledgement before you leave. No. The kind I'm talking about is quieter than that. It happens without announcement. Without ultimatum. Without the performance of pain that most people mistake for power. It happens when someone reaches a place so deep inside themselves, a place built from enough disappointment, enough self-reflection, enough growth, that they simply stop. No explanation. No final argument. No last attempt to make someone understand what they never chose to understand when it mattered. They just walk away. And here is what nobody prepares you for, what nobody warns the person left behind. Silence hits harder than any argument ever could. Because an argument can be countered. A speech can be dismissed. A door slam can be rationalized away as drama, as emotion, as someone who just needs to calm down. But silence? Silence is a verdict. And verdicts, once delivered by someone who has truly made peace with their decision, cannot be appealed. Welcome to the Stoic path. What we are about to explore today is not just about relationships. It is about the deepest kind of self-respect a human being can develop. The kind that doesn't need applause. The kind that doesn't need the other person to finally understand. The kind that walks, quietly, completely, without looking back, and trusts that what is felt in the wake of that departure will say everything that words never could. Stay with me. The moment before the walk. Let me tell you about a woman named Camille. Camille was the kind of person who gave everything. Not because she was naive. Not because she didn't know better. But because generosity was woven into the fabric of who she was, the way she loved, the way she showed up, the way she invested in the people she chose to keep close. For 3 years, she gave everything to a relationship that took everything she offered and called it normal. She cooked and he didn't notice. She listened for hours and he half listened for minutes. She rearranged her schedule, her dreams, her emotional landscape to accommodate someone who never once asked what she needed. She brought warmth to a space that gave her cold in return, and convinced herself, for 3 years, that if she just gave a little more, loved a little louder, stayed a little longer, something would shift. It didn't shift. And then one Tuesday, not a significant Tuesday, not a Tuesday with any particular drama attached to it, something in Camille shifted instead. Not in an explosive way. In a quiet way. Like a door closing gently in a room at the end of a long hallway. Barely audible. But final. She didn't make a speech that Tuesday. She didn't send a long message she had drafted 17 times and never sent. She didn't call her friends to process it out loud or post a cryptic caption that was really aimed at one person. She just stopped. Stopped over-explaining herself. Stopped making herself smaller to fit a space that was never designed for her. Stopped pouring water into a vessel that had been cracked from the beginning. And in that stopping, in that quiet, resolute, completely undramatic stopping, Camille did something that 3 years of trying had never accomplished. She became impossible to ignore. Why silence is the most powerful language. We have been taught, most of us, that communication is the answer to everything. Talk it out. Express your feelings. Make sure you're heard. Use your words. And communication matters. It genuinely does. In healthy, reciprocal, mutually respectful relationships, honest communication is the foundation of everything real. But here is what nobody tells you about communicating with someone who is not ready to hear you. It doesn't work. Not because your words are wrong. Not because your feelings aren't valid. Not because you haven't expressed yourself clearly enough. but because communication requires two willing participants. And when one participant has decided, consciously or unconsciously, that your words are optional, that your needs are negotiable, that your presence is guaranteed regardless of how they treat it, no amount of articulate, heartfelt, perfectly worded communication will change that calculus. What changes it is absence. Specifically, the absence of someone whose presence was taken for granted. There is a principle in human psychology that is as old as human nature itself: we do not value what we believe we cannot lose. It is wired into us at a level beneath logic, beneath reason, beneath all the things we tell ourselves about how we treat people we care about. We take for granted the sun until it goes behind clouds. We take for granted the air until something restricts it. We take for granted the person who was always there, until the day they aren't. Seneca wrote, "Omnia aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est." Everything else belongs to others. Only time is truly ours. When you walk away silently, you are not being cold. You are not being cruel. You are simply withdrawing the most valuable thing you ever gave someone, your time, your energy, your presence, and allowing them, for the first time, to experience what life feels like in its absence. And that experience, that sudden, disorienting awareness of a silence where warmth used to be, is the only teacher some people are capable of learning from. The difference between walking away and running away. I need to make a distinction here because it matters enormously. There are two kinds of leaving. And they are not the same thing. Not in their energy, not in their motivation, not in what they produce. Running away is leaving from fear. It is the exit made in panic, in avoidance, in the desperate hope that if you just remove yourself from the situation, the pain will stop and the problem will disappear. Running away is reactive. It is propelled by what you are escaping from. Walking away is leaving from clarity. It is the exit made after examination, after you have sat with the situation honestly enough and long enough to understand it completely, after you have tried what needed to be tried, said what needed to be said, given what deserved to be given. Walking away is proactive. It is propelled by what you are moving toward. One is flight. The other is direction. And the reason the silent walk away hits differently, the reason it produces the kind of impact that years of dramatic exits never achieve, is because the person watching can feel the difference. They can feel when you are running. And running confirms their suspicion that they still have power over you. That you are still reactive to them. That the connection, however dysfunctional, is still alive enough to produce chaos in you. But when you walk, slowly, quietly, without looking back, what they feel is something they are entirely unprepared for. They feel your freedom. And there is nothing more unsettling to someone who took your presence for granted than watching you leave like someone who has somewhere better to be. Short story, The Gardener and the Stone. There was a gardener who spent years trying to grow something beautiful in rocky, inhospitable soil. Every season, she planted. Every season, she watered, tended, hoped. Every season, she watched her efforts produce something stunted and struggling, not because her seeds were bad, not because her care was insufficient, but because the ground itself was not willing to receive what she was offering. For years, she told herself the soil would soften. That with enough patience, enough water, enough time, it would become what it needed to be. It didn't soften. And one spring morning, instead of planting again in the same rocky ground, the gardener did something different. She picked up her tools. She looked at the soil one last time, not with anger, not with resentment, not with the energy of someone who needed the soil to acknowledge what it had cost her. Just with clarity. With the quiet understanding of someone who finally knows the difference between perseverance and self-punishment. And she walked to the other side of the garden. Where the soil was rich. Where the light was right. Where the conditions had always been waiting for someone willing to plant. That season, she grew something extraordinary. Not because she found better seeds. But because she finally stopped wasting them in ground that was never going to receive them. The people in your life are soil. Some soil grows things. Some soil doesn't. And the bravest, most self-respecting, most stoically grounded thing you can do, is to know the difference. And act on it. Not with anger. Not with a need for the soil to apologize for its nature. Just with the quiet, purposeful decision to take your seeds somewhere they can actually become what they were always meant to become. What happens in them when you leave? Now let's talk about what actually happens on the other side of your silence. Because this is the part that most people who are considering walking away want to understand. Not from a place of revenge, or at least, not only from that place. But from a genuine, honest curiosity. Will they feel it? Will they understand what they had? Will the silence finally say what the words never could? The answer, in most cases, is yes. But not immediately. The first thing that happens when you walk away silently is not realization. It is not regret. It is not the tearful awakening of someone who finally sees what they lost. The first thing that happens is disbelief. Because you were always there. You were the constant. The reliable one. The person who came back no matter what, who answered no matter when, who stayed no matter how hard the staying was. And people who have been given that kind of consistency build their entire sense of security around it, often without consciously choosing to, often without even being aware they've done it. So when you stop, the first response is almost always, this isn't real. They'll be back. They wait for the message that doesn't come. They wait for the call that doesn't come. They wait for the familiar pattern to reassert itself, because it always has before. And when it doesn't come, when the silence stretches from hours into days, from days into weeks, from weeks into a shape of time that begins to feel permanent, something cracks open. It is in that crack, that uncomfortable, disorienting space where your absence has made room for the truth, that the feeling finally lands. Not just I miss them. But, I understand now what I had. And I understand now what I did with it. That understanding, that specific, late arriving, devastatingly clear understanding, is the thing that no argument, no speech, no tearful confrontation could have produced. It took your silence to deliver it. And your silence delivered it completely. The Stoic foundation, why the walk away is an act of wisdom, not weakness. I want to ground this in philosophy for a moment. Because I think it's important that you understand that what we are describing is not a tactic. It is not a manipulation. It is not a game designed to make someone chase you. It is one of the oldest, most rigorously examined, most deeply respected principles in the history of human wisdom. The Stoics called it apatheia, and it is widely misunderstood as emotional detachment or indifference. It is neither. Apatheia is the state of being uncontrolled by destructive emotions. The freedom from the reactive, impulsive, ego-driven responses that cause us to stay in situations that diminish us, not because staying serves any real purpose, but because leaving requires us to sit with discomfort, uncertainty, and the grief of an ending. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations about the practice of examining every situation with absolute honesty, stripping away the stories, the hopes, the emotional investments, and seeing it for exactly what it is. Not what you wish it were. Not what it used to be. Not what it might become if the other person would just change. What it is. And when you see something clearly, when you strip away every excuse, every hope, every sunk cost, and what remains is a situation that is diminishing you, disrespecting you, or simply not serving the person you are trying to become. The Stoic answer is not to argue louder. The Stoic answer is to act in accordance with wisdom. And sometimes, often, wisdom looks like walking away. Quietly. Without a speech. Without needing to be understood. Just walking, with the full, settled, unshakable clarity of someone who knows exactly what they are worth and has finally decided to live accordingly. We have only covered half of this conversation. And already I suspect something has shifted in you, some recognition of a truth you have been carrying quietly, perhaps for a long time. Maybe you are someone who has been on the verge of walking away. Who has tried every other language and found that none of them were heard. Who is tired in a way that goes deeper than sleep can fix, tired in the soul, in the spirit, in the place where your self-respect lives. Or maybe you are someone who let someone walk away from you. And you are only now beginning to understand what you lost, not because they told you, but because their silence has been louder than anything they could have said. Either way, this conversation is for you. There is a question that lives in the chest of everyone who has ever considered walking away from something that was slowly, quietly, taking more than it was giving. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't come with clarity or confidence. It comes in the middle of ordinary moments, washing dishes, driving alone, lying awake at 3 a.m. staring at a ceiling that has heard too many of your silent conversations. The question is this. Am I strong enough to actually do it? Not strong enough to be angry. Anger is easy. Not strong enough to threaten. Threats are easy. Not strong enough to have the conversation one more time, to try one more approach, to give one more chance. Strong enough to leave. Strong enough to close a chapter that still has unresolved pages. Strong enough to walk away from something familiar, even a familiar that hurts, into an unknown that requires you to trust yourself completely. That is the question. And today, in this final part of our conversation, we are going to answer it. Not with empty encouragement. Not with a list of affirmations to repeat in the mirror. But with the honest, grounded, philosophically anchored truth about what it actually takes to walk away, and what waits for you on the other side when you do. The hardest part, why walking away feels impossible. Before we talk about the walk, we need to talk honestly about why it feels so hard. Because it does feel hard. Enormously, sometimes paralyzingly hard. And I want to honor that, not bypass it, not minimize it with motivational language that skips over the real weight of what leaving costs. There is a woman named Diane. Diane had known for 2 years that she needed to walk away from a friendship that had become one-sided in ways she could no longer pretend not to see. A friendship where she was always the one reaching out, always the one adjusting, always the one absorbing the other person's chaos while her own needs sat quietly in the corner, waiting for a turn that never came. She knew. In the clear, unambiguous way that people know things they are not yet ready to act on. But she stayed. Not because she was weak. Not because she lacked intelligence or self-awareness. But because of something that the psychologists call the sunk cost fallacy, and that the rest of us just call being human. The sunk cost fallacy is the tendency to continue investing in something, a relationship, a situation, a path, not because it is serving us, but because of how much we have already invested in it. The years. The energy. The hope. The version of ourselves we poured into something that didn't pour back. I've already given so much, the thinking goes. If I leave now, what was it all for? And that question, what was it all for, is the trap. Because it ties your future decisions to your past investments rather than to your present reality and your future well-being. The Stoics had a devastatingly clean answer to this trap. Epictetus said, make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. What is in your power is not the past. The past is gone. The years already spent, the energy already given, the love already offered, those belong to history now. You cannot reclaim them by staying. You can only decide what you do with what remains. And what remains is today. And tomorrow. And every day after that, which can be spent continuing to pour into something that will never be full, or redirected toward the life, the people, the purpose that will actually receive what you have to give. The walk away is hard not because you are weak. It is hard because you love genuinely. Because you invested honestly. Because you are the kind of person who doesn't give up easily, and that quality, which is one of your greatest strengths, can become a cage when it is applied without discernment to something that doesn't deserve it. Recognizing this is not defeat. It is the beginning of wisdom. Short story, the river that changed course. There is a river in the mountains that, for centuries, ran in a single direction. It carved that path deep into the rock, not quickly, not dramatically, but with the patient, relentless, day-after-day commitment of water that knows only one instruction, keep moving. And then one season, something shifted in the landscape. A rockfall. A geological change subtle enough that most observers didn't notice it at first. But the river noticed. Not with resistance. Not with grief. Not with any attachment to the path it had carved for centuries. It simply found a new direction. Quietly. Without ceremony. With the same patient, relentless, forward-moving energy it had always had, now flowing somewhere new. Within a generation, it had carved a new canyon. More beautiful than the first. You are the river. The path you have been carving, the direction you have been pouring your energy, your time, your presence, it may have served its purpose. It may have been exactly right for the person you were when you began it. But you are not the same person you were when you began it. You have grown. You have learned. You have sat with enough disappointment to know, with a clarity you didn't have before, what you actually need and what you are no longer willing to accept. The river does not mourn the canyon it leaves behind. It moves. And in moving, it builds something new. Something that will outlast the detour by centuries. What it actually takes, the inner work of walking away. Now I want to get honest and practical. Because walking away is not just a decision. It is a process. And most people underestimate the inner work required to do it cleanly, to walk away in the way we have been describing, with silence and dignity and without the need for the other person's acknowledgement. Here is what that inner work actually looks like. The first piece of work is grieving before you go. One of the most common mistakes people make when walking away is leaving before they have grieved. They walk out the door still hoping. Still half expecting that the leaving will produce the change that the staying never did. Still attached to the outcome of the other person's reaction. That is not a clean walk. That is a strategy. And strategies can be countered. A clean walk requires grief first. It requires sitting with the reality of what this relationship, this situation, this chapter actually was, not the version you hoped it would become, not the potential you saw in it, not the best moments extracted from the worst pattern, but what it actually, consistently, demonstrably was. Grieve the version you wanted. Grieve the potential that went unrealized. Grieve the time spent and the love given and the hope that kept you longer than the evidence warranted. Grieve it completely. Let it be as sad as it actually is. And then, from that honest, grieved, clear-eyed place, walk. Not to escape the grief. Not to force a reaction. But because you have finished mourning the thing that was never going to be what you needed it to be. And finished mourning means finished. It means you are no longer waiting for a different ending. The second piece of work is releasing the need for acknowledgement. This is perhaps the most difficult inner work of all. Because part of us, the very human, very understandable part, wants them to understand. Wants them to see it. Wants to look in their eyes and watch the realization land. Wants the apology, the acknowledgement, the moment of reckoning where they finally say, I understand what I had. I understand what I did. I'm sorry. Let me tell you something honest about that need. It is real. It is legitimate. And in a better world, in a world where people consistently had the self-awareness and emotional maturity to see their impact before it was too late, it would be satisfied. But here is the truth you need to carry with you. Your healing cannot be contingent on their awakening. Because their awakening may never come. And even if it does, it will come on their timeline, in their way, filtered through their capacity for self-reflection. You cannot control it. You cannot produce it. You cannot earn it by staying or accelerate it by leaving. What you can control is whether you allow the absence of that acknowledgement to keep you tethered to a place you have already outgrown. The Stoics were ruthlessly clear on this point. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect." Waiting for acknowledgement that may never come, at the expense of your own forward motion, is breaking faith with yourself. Walk without the acknowledgement. Trust that the silence you leave behind will do the work that your words never could. And let your next chapter be evidence enough. The third piece of work is building the life you walk toward. Walking away is only half the story. The half that matters most, the half that determines whether the walk was truly an act of self-respect or simply an escape, is what you walk toward. Because a walk away that leads nowhere is just running with better posture. Before you leave, begin building. Not after. Not once the dust has settled. Now. Begin rebuilding the relationship with yourself that the situation may have eroded. Begin reclaiming the interests, the friendships, the sense of personal direction that got set aside when something else took up too much space. Begin answering, honestly and specifically, the question that focused, purposeful living requires. Who am I when I am not defined by what I am walking away from? That question is both terrifying and liberating. And the answer, discovered gradually, imperfectly, but with genuine curiosity and commitment, is the real destination of the walk. Short story, The Man Who Stopped Explaining. There was a man named Edward who spent 4 years in a professional relationship that diminished him. A business partner who took credit consistently. Who made decisions unilaterally and presented them as collaborative. Who knew, with absolute precision, how to make Edward feel like the problem whenever Edward raised a concern. For 4 years, Edward explained himself. Justified himself. Tried, with increasing desperation and decreasing dignity, to make his partner understand the impact of his behavior. His partner listened politely. And changed nothing. One morning, Edward made a decision that felt terrifyingly simple. He stopped explaining. He didn't have a final confrontation. He didn't send the email he had drafted 14 times. He didn't wait for the perfect moment or the right circumstances. He simply began, quietly, systematically, without announcement, extracting himself from the partnership. New clients went elsewhere. His skills were redirected. His energy, which had been spent almost entirely on managing the dynamic of a relationship that was costing him everything, was suddenly available for the work itself. 6 months later, Edward was building something that was entirely his. His former partner called, multiple times. Left messages that moved through confusion to frustration to something that sounded, by the end, almost like regret. Edward listened to the messages. He did not return the calls. Not from anger. Not from cruelty. But from the clear, settled understanding that the conversation had already happened, in every meeting where he'd raised concerns that were dismissed, in every attempt at honesty that was reframed as a problem, in every moment where he tried to make someone understand what they had chosen not to understand. The conversation was over. The silence was the period at the end of the sentence. And Edward's new life, built in the quiet aftermath of a walk his former partner never saw coming, became the only response that mattered. Who you become on the other side. I want to talk about this. Because this is the part that nobody discusses when they talk about walking away. Everyone talks about what the other person feels. Will they regret it? Will they realize? Will they come back? And those questions are understandable. I addressed them in part 1. I don't dismiss them. But they are the wrong questions to center. The right question, the question that will actually shape the quality of your life going forward, is this. Who do you become on the other side of the walk? Because here is what I have observed, across thousands of human stories, across the wisdom of philosophers who understood the human condition with a depth that still feels modern centuries later. The people who walk away cleanly, who do the inner work, who grieve before they go, who release the need for acknowledgement, who build towards something rather than just away from something, those people are transformed by the walk. Not immediately. Not painlessly. Not without the complicated grief of an ending. But transformed. They discover a version of themselves that the previous situation had been quietly suppressing. A voice that got louder in the absence of the dynamic that required it to stay small. A capacity for joy that had been rationed for so long that its return feels almost unfamiliar, like light in a room that has been dim for years. They discover what they actually want. Not what they settled for. Not what they told themselves was enough. But what, in the honest, unfiltered quiet of a life that is finally their own, they actually, specifically, deeply want. And they discover something that the Stoics considered the highest achievement of a human life. Equanimity. The settled, unshakable, weather-resistant peace of someone who knows who they are, what they value, and what they will and will not accept. Not happiness in the simple, surface sense. But something deeper. Something that doesn't require the right circumstances or the right people or the resolution of every outstanding wound. Just peace. Earned. Real. Entirely theirs. That is what waits on the other side of the walk. Not a perfect life. But an honest one. And an honest life, lived with clarity, with self-respect, with the quiet confidence of someone who has learned what they are worth by finally, fully acting on it, is worth more than any comfortable situation that required you to be less than you are. The final word, to the one considering the walk. If you are sitting with this right now, if something in this conversation has been speaking directly to a situation you have been living inside of, I want to say something to you directly. You already know. You know whether this applies to you. You know whether there is something, a relationship, a dynamic, a situation, that has been taking more than it gives for longer than you should have allowed. You know whether you have been explaining yourself to someone who chose not to hear you. You know whether the familiar you are holding on to is actually comfort, or just the known version of a pain you have gotten used to. You know. Not to giving up. Not to running away. But to something rarer and more powerful than either. You are close to walking away. Quietly. With dignity. With the full, settled weight of someone who has done the inner work, who has grieved what needed grieving, released what needed releasing, and begun building what needed building. And when you walk, they will feel it. Not because you designed it that way. Not because silence is a strategy. But because presence, real, generous, genuine human presence, always leaves a mark when it goes. They will feel the absence of your laughter in the space where it used to live. They will feel the silence where your voice used to be. They will reach for the comfort of your consistency and find, for the first time, that it is not there. And in that feeling, in that specific, undeniable, aching awareness of what is now missing, they will understand something that all your words, all your explanations, all your carefully crafted attempts at communication could never have delivered. They will understand what they walk away. Silently. Purposefully. Without looking back. And trust that the life waiting for you on the other side of that walk has been patient. It has been there all along. Waiting for you to finally choose. We don't do surface. We don't do empty motivation. We don't hand you a list of affirmations and send you on your way. We go deep. We go honest. We go to the real places, the complicated, uncomfortable, profoundly human places, where actual change lives. Share this with someone who is carrying something heavy right now. Someone who has been trying to make someone understand what they refuse to understand. Someone who is close, closer than they know, to the walk that will change everything. Send it to them. No explanation needed. They will know why you sent it. This is the Stoic path. Keep walking.